Imagine this. You walk into a medieval feast. The candles are flickering, the air is thick with the smell of roasted game, mulled wine, and... oh wait, what's that? That suspicious and slightly funky aroma? Yep, rotten meat, served proudly at the table. And no, it wasn't a kitchen accident. It was a delicacy, a real treat. Welcome to the weird and wonderful dining habits of the Middle Ages. But here's the big question. Why did medieval people enjoy rotten meat? Let's dive right into it, right here on History of Food. Now, before you gag or call medieval people the original daredevils, let's rewind a bit. Back then, refrigeration didn't exist. The closest thing they had to a fridge was a hole in the ground, maybe a cool cellar if you were rich. Meat spoiled fast. And since hunting and butchering usually happened in bulk, you had two choices: eat it quickly or get creative. Guess which one they chose? That's right. Medieval folks leaned into the funk. They let the meat age, soften, and sometimes straight up rot. Why? Well, for one, meat wasn't always easy to come by, and throwing it out was basically throwing away a treasure. And two, they actually thought the taste was good. I mean, let's be honest, this is the same era that thought bathing was optional, so maybe we shouldn't be surprised that a slimy, stinky goose leg was considered gourmet. But here's the thing. Rotten meat wasn't always about being broke or desperate. Wealthy nobles also dabbled in the aged meat game. Think of it like the medieval version of dry-aged steak today. Except instead of paying $80 for a beautifully aged ribeye with a hint of nuttiness, you were gnawing on venison that had been sitting in a pantry for weeks, developing character. Honestly, it was less Michelin star and more dare from a drunk night. And let's not forget, they had spices. Oh yes, the famous spice trade of the Middle Ages wasn't just about flavor. It was about survival. Cinnamon, cloves, pepper, nutmeg, all incredibly expensive, sometimes literally worth more than gold. Sprinkle enough cinnamon on that questionable lamb, and suddenly it was less oh no and more oh wow. Medieval Cuisine, the original cover-up artist. But wait, it gets better. Some sources suggest that people believed spoiled meat had health benefits. Yep, there was this idea floating around that funky meat was easier to digest because it was already, well, breaking down. Kind of like how some people today argue kombucha is good for your gut, except instead of sipping fermented tea, you were chewing on beef that had the same texture as an old boot. Don't you just love science before science was a thing? Let's paint a little scene here. Imagine you're a medieval lord hosting a banquet. The hall is packed. Long wooden tables are loaded with trenchers of bread, jugs of ale, pies stuffed with mystery meat, and right in the middle, the piece de résistance, a slab of venison that smells like someone forgot it in the sun. And you're the hero of the feast. Congratulations, you've just served rotten meat like a 5-star chef. Of course, not all rotten meat was intentional. Sometimes things went south, literally and fatally. Food poisoning was a common guest at the table. This is where beer, wine, and vinegar stepped in. People often soaked or boiled meat in alcohol or acidic liquids, which probably killed some bacteria, or at least made the stomachache feel more fun. Because nothing says Friday night vibes like a jug of wine and a half-decayed duck. Now here's a cultural twist. Medieval people didn't see rottenness the way we do. Today, if meat smells off, we panic order takeout. Back then, the line between aged and spoiled was blurrier than a knight's vision after too much mead. They even had a term for it, haute goût, French for high taste. Fancy, right? But really it meant, yep, this pheasant is stinky and that's exactly how we like it. Speaking of cheese, let's not ignore the obvious. We still eat funky stuff today. Blue cheese smells like feet. Kimchi is fermented cabbage that could double as a biohazard. And dry-aged steak is essentially meat that's been chilling, sometimes literally, for weeks, developing mold on the outside that gets cut away before serving. So before we laugh too hard at medieval people, maybe we should look at our own dinner plates. Who's the real weirdo here? And here's where the comedy writes itself. Imagine explaining to a medieval peasant that in the future, we'd have machines that keep food cold forever, that we could ship fresh meat across continents, and yet, people willingly pay extra for steak that's been aged. Their reaction? Probably something like, wait, so you invented a magic cold box, but you still want it to smell funny? Now, let's spice things up with a fun fact. Medieval cookbooks, yes, they had those, sometimes suggested using meat that had been lying around a while, then chopping it up and drowning it in spices. One recipe for game birds even said to hang the bird by its neck until it literally fell off. That was your signal it was ready. Can you imagine that in your kitchen? And then there were pies. Meat pies were a medieval staple, partly because the crust could seal in meat and make it last longer. But let's be real, a pie stuffed with funky pigeon isn't exactly the kind of thing you want on the Great British Bake Off. Paul Hollywood would not give you a handshake for that one. So was rotten meat really a delicacy or just necessity dressed up in spices and good marketing? Probably a little of both. The rich treated it as high-class dining while the poor just made do. Either way, it's proof that humans will always find a way to turn survival into style. Fast forward to today, and the idea of eating actual rotten meat makes us gag. But in a way, our food culture isn't so different. We've just evolved the techniques. Instead of uncontrolled rot, we've mastered fermentation, curing, aging, and pickling. We've kept the funk but added science to make sure it doesn't kill us. So next time you're enjoying a charcuterie board with prosciutto, salami, and a little stinky cheese, raise a glass to your medieval ancestors. They walked so your Instagram cheese board could run. At the end of the day, the Middle Ages remind us of a simple truth. Food isn't just about taste, it's about culture, necessity, and sometimes sheer weirdness. Thank you for watching.